Have you ever sat in your favorite chair, maybe with a cup of coffee in your hand, and suddenly felt a deep ache? Not in your bones, but in your heart? That moment when a phone call or a text from your grown child turns into an unexpected storm of blame and guilt. They bring up the past. They talk about things you did or didn't do. And before you know it, you're sitting there wondering, why do they think everything that went wrong in their life is my fault? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. So many moms and dads, especially those of us in our 60s and beyond, are quietly carrying that same weight. And it hurts. Because no matter how old our children get, they're still our babies in our eyes. We still want to protect them, help them, be there for them. But what happens when they only see us as the source of their pain? I want you to know something right off the bat. Being blamed does not mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you failed. And it certainly doesn't mean you're stuck. You still have the power to breathe, to reflect, to heal, and yes, to grow stronger than ever, even now. Today, we're going to talk about what to do when your adult kids blame you for everything. Not just how to survive it, but how to rise from it with grace, clarity, and strength. This isn't about fixing your kids. It's not about defending your every choice. It's about helping you reclaim your peace of mind, your emotional strength, and maybe even your joy again. Let's start with something that often gets overlooked when emotions are high. Self-care. And I don't just mean spa days or scented candles, though, hey, those can help too. I'm talking about the kind of self-care that grounds you when everything else feels shaky. The kind that reminds you that you are not just a parent, you are a whole human being. When you're being blamed by someone you love, especially your child, it's easy to fall into a spiral of guilt, shame, or self-doubt. You start questioning everything. Was I too strict? Too soft? Did I miss something big? Those thoughts can wear you down fast. And that's exactly why you need to prioritize taking care of your inner world. Start with the basics. How are you sleeping lately? Are you eating regular meals or just nibbling through stress? Are you getting outside, even just for a short walk or to sit on the porch? I know these sound simple, but they're foundational. Your mind, body, and spirit are all connected, and when one is off balance, it affects the others. But beyond the basics, real self-care also means creating emotional space for yourself. That might mean journaling for a few minutes each day to let your thoughts out without judgment. It could mean turning off your phone when you need a break from emotional conversations. It might even mean talking to someone, a friend, a support group, a counselor, someone who listens without blaming or fixing. And here's something else. Choosing not to respond to every blame-filled message or comment from your adult child isn't selfish. It's self-preservation. You don't have to answer every call that rattles your nerves. You don't have to reply to every text that reopens old wounds. You are allowed to protect your peace. That leads us into something deeply connected. How we communicate. You know how it goes. One sentence from them sets you off. You get defensive. You raise your voice. They raise theirs. And before you know it, you're in another emotional war, and no one's really hearing the other. Let's change that pattern, not by controlling them, but by choosing a different response for ourselves. One of the most powerful tools in any conversation is using I statements instead of you accusations. Instead of saying, you always blame me, try, I feel hurt when I'm blamed for things I can't change. See the difference? You're still being honest, but you're not attacking. You're owning your feelings, and that's something no one can argue with. Another tip is to pause before reacting. I know, it's easier said than done. But even taking 3 deep breaths before replying to a heated message can make a huge difference. It gives you a moment to decide how you want to show up in that moment, calm, clear, and in control, not reactive or rattled. And don't forget, just because they want to argue doesn't mean you have to. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Think of it like a party you didn't RSVP to. You can say, "I'm not in a place to talk about this right now," and walk away peacefully. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Your words matter, but so does your energy. When you stay grounded, your calm becomes contagious. And even if your child doesn't calm down right away, you'll know you didn't pour more fire on the flame. Now, as we're having this heart-to-heart, you might be thinking, okay, I can work on self-care. I can practice calmer communication. But what about all the years I spent bending over backwards for this child, and now they act like I ruined their life? That ache, that heartbreak, is real. But here's a gentle truth. You're not responsible for their entire life path. You helped guide them. You loved them. You sacrificed for them. But at a certain point, they began making their own choices. And just as they own those choices, they also own the consequences. Still, that doesn't stop many of us from feeling the urge to keep rescuing them, even when they're blaming us. Maybe they're still living in your house. Maybe you're still paying some of their bills. Maybe you keep stepping in to fix things because that's just what parents do. And we'll talk more about that soon, because it's deeply connected to the whole healing journey. But right now, let's stay with this moment. This quiet place where you're reminded that you're doing your best. Maybe not perfectly. None of us are perfect. But you're still here, still loving, still trying, and that matters. Before we move on, I want you to do something for yourself, even just for today. Choose one small thing that brings you comfort. A walk outside, a phone call with someone who makes you laugh, a few minutes to sit in silence and just breathe. Let that be your anchor. Let that be your reminder that you deserve peace too, because you do. So now that you've taken that breath, that little moment of stillness for yourself, let's go a little deeper into something that can be hard to face, but so important for your healing. Letting go of blame, both theirs and maybe even your own. When we talk about being blamed by our adult children, it's easy to keep the spotlight on them. What they're saying, how they're acting, how unfair it feels. And it is unfair. No one is denying that. But if we're going to truly move forward, not just survive these strained relationships, but find our own strength in them, we have to take a look inward too. That doesn't mean accepting false blame. It doesn't mean taking responsibility for things that were never your fault. It means being honest with yourself about what you can control, and where maybe, just maybe, there's room for growth or healing or even a gentle apology. Not to get something in return, not to win your child back, but to free yourself from the weight of what's unspoken. Ask yourself, and be kind when you do, are there any patterns in how you've responded to conflict over the years? Are there things you've said in the heat of the moment that might still echo in your child's memory? Were there times you did the best you could, but your best still left some gaps? Again, this isn't about blaming yourself. It's about giving yourself the gift of reflection. Because only when we see the full picture can we stop carrying guilt that doesn't belong to us, and make peace with the parts that might. Let's be honest. Parenting doesn't come with a manual. You probably raised your child the best way you knew how, with what you had, what you were taught, and under whatever stress life threw your way. That's not failure. That's being human. And here's the truth most people don't say out loud. Every parent messes up at some point. That doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you real. And if your child is bringing up old wounds now, there may be space for you to gently acknowledge your side of the story. Not as a confession, but as a way of honoring the truth and freeing yourself from the burden of defensiveness. You don't need to rehash every moment of the past. Sometimes a simple, heartfelt statement like, "I know I made mistakes, and I'm sorry for the ways that hurt you," can soften even the hardest edges, in them and in you. And even if they don't accept it, you'll know you've done your part to make peace. Now, let's talk about something that can feel uncomfortable, but is a total game changer in these kinds of relationships. And that's boundaries. Yes, that word might sound cold or even selfish at first, especially when it comes to your own child. But boundaries are actually the opposite of selfish. They're how we protect love from turning into resentment. They help relationships breathe. They help you breathe. When you've spent years, maybe decades, sacrificing, giving, rescuing, providing, it becomes second nature. But if your adult child is blaming you constantly, relying on you for things they should be managing on their own, or expecting you to fix every bump in their road, it might be time to gently loosen that grip. Ask yourself, are you still financially supporting them in ways that enable their avoidance of responsibility? Are you still solving their emotional problems when they haven't made an effort to help themselves? Are you saying yes when your heart is screaming no? Setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting someone off. It means showing them and reminding yourself where you end and they begin. It means saying, I love you, but I can't keep paying your rent. Or, I care about you, but I'm not going to engage in conversations where I'm being constantly blamed or disrespected. And if that thought makes your heart race a little, that's normal. Many of us were taught that love equals sacrifice, that being a good parent means giving endlessly. But the truth is, if you're drained, worn down, walking on eggshells, you're not helping them. You're just losing yourself. Boundaries are actually a form of love, for them and for you. Because when your child is forced to stand on their own 2 feet, they learn resilience. And when you step back and take care of yourself, you regain your strength. This doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can start small. Maybe it's a decision to stop replying to emotionally charged texts late at night. Maybe it's asking them to contribute to the household if they're living under your roof. Maybe it's saying, we can talk, but only if the conversation stays respectful. These are not punishments. They are standards, and you are allowed to have them. Now, I want to acknowledge something very real. Many of us in this stage of life are dealing with not just emotional blame, but the fear of losing our connection with our kids altogether. That fear can keep us clinging to unhealthy dynamics just to keep the peace. But let me say this clearly. Real peace doesn't come from walking on eggshells. It comes from truth, from kindness, and from healthy space. And in that space, something powerful happens. You stop reacting from guilt or fear and start responding from wisdom. You begin to trust yourself again, not as a perfect parent, but as a growing, evolving person who still deserves kindness and respect. It's not about changing your child. You may not be able to do that. But you can change how you show up, and that changes everything. Remember, you are not alone. So many others have walked this same path. They've been blamed, misunderstood, even estranged. And they've found healing, strength, and even reconciliation over time. It's possible. It starts with compassion for yourself. One of the most powerful things you can do, once you've reclaimed your self-care, practiced better communication, and begun to set boundaries, is this. Encourage personal responsibility, not just in yourself, but in your child. This might be the hardest part of all, especially when you're a parent who's spent years, maybe even a lifetime, stepping in, smoothing things over, making sacrifices, and quietly holding your family together. But there comes a point when love doesn't mean holding on tighter. It means letting go with grace. Now, I know that can sound harsh. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means recognizing where your job ends and where theirs begins. Your child may be an adult by age, but if they're still acting like a child emotionally, or leaning on you for everything while blaming you at the same time, it's time to gently hand them the reins to their own life. You can't carry their past for them. You can't undo the choices they've made. And no matter how much you love them, you can't live their life for them. That's not your burden anymore. That's not your calling anymore. Your calling now is to step into peace, to create a future for yourself that's no longer tied to guilt or walking on eggshells. Sometimes that shift starts with a simple sentence. Something like, "I trust you to figure this out." Or, "I believe in your ability to take care of yourself." And then, here's the hard part, you step back. You don't jump in to fix it. You let them sit in the discomfort of their own choices. Because that's where growth happens, in the uncomfortable moments. That's how adults become adults, by taking ownership, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. It may not be instant. It may not be smooth. Your child may resist, complain, lash out, or guilt you even more. But that's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of where they are in their process. And they'll never move forward if you keep stepping in to shield them from the lessons life is trying to teach. And you've already earned your peace. I want to tell you something that I hope you let sink in. It's okay to want happiness. It's okay to want rest. It's okay to laugh again, to dream again, to enjoy your life, even if your relationship with your child isn't perfect, especially if it isn't. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cold for creating space. You are not uncaring because you're no longer taking responsibility for someone else's emotions. In fact, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop trying to be their hero, to stop absorbing their pain, to stop making their struggles your fault, because only then do they learn that their healing, their change, has to come from within, not from your sacrifices. And this goes for you too. Healing doesn't come from waiting for them to finally understand you, apologize, or treat you differently. Healing starts the moment you choose to understand yourself, to treat yourself with compassion, to speak kindly to that part of you that's still aching for connection, still longing to be seen and appreciated. I know this is not the road you expected. None of us, when we held our babies for the first time, imagined this kind of pain would come later. But life is full of detours, and sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin after the ones we thought would break us. You still have time. You still have choices. You still have joy waiting for you. And that joy doesn't have to depend on anyone else's approval, permission, or behavior. It lives in the simple moments. A quiet morning, a walk through the park, a conversation with someone who sees you for who you really are. It lives in the things that make your soul breathe again. So if you've been blamed, misunderstood, or pushed away, take this moment to come home to yourself. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're simply standing at a crossroads, and you get to choose. You can choose to stop apologizing for everything. You can choose to stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening. You can choose to rebuild your life with people who love you as you are, or even just with yourself, one peaceful day at a time. And maybe, just maybe, as you start showing up with a calmer spirit, a clearer voice, and a stronger sense of self, your child will begin to notice. Maybe not right away, maybe not the way you hope, but people do change. And sometimes the change begins when we stop trying to control everything and start modeling a different way of being, one rooted in love, not fear, in boundaries, not guilt, in truth, not constant explaining. I want to encourage you today, wherever you are in this journey, whether your relationship with your adult child is rocky, broken, or simply strained, you have not failed. You are not alone. And there is still so much life ahead of you. Take care of your heart. Surround yourself with people who build you up, not tear you down. Tell your story to someone who truly listens. And remind yourself, as often as you need, that your value was never tied to someone else's opinion of you. Not even your child's. You were worthy the moment you were born, and you're still worthy now. If this video has spoken to you, even just a little, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. This is a safe space. No judgment, just community. Because the truth is, so many others are walking this same road, and you never know who might find comfort in your words. And if you want to be part of a space that uplifts, supports, and encourages you in this season of life, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Here on Strong Elderly Life, we talk about the things that really matter, from family dynamics to healing, growth, and finding joy again at any age. So go ahead, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, you're not just someone's mom or dad. You're a whole, beautiful, evolving person. And you deserve to live in peace. Here's to living your best life, one honest, brave step at a time.